stories often begin with observation, the little rituals of everyday life, the conversations we overhear, the contradictions we live in, and the versions of ourselves we present to the world. So, have you always been someone who observes people closely?
In a family that moved around a lot. My father was in the army. And because he moved around so much, I was always the new girl in society and at school. So when you're a new person, you what do? You enter this room full of people and you scope the scene, right? You try and figure people out because you don't have shared history with them. You have no reference to them from your childhood. And whatever age, even a 5-year-old will enter a class tentatively, a new classroom, right? So I think it's probably that made me an observer of people, and then that started coming through in my writing. And more than just observing people and their behavior, with age I started to wonder what was their childhood like. Why are they who they are and the way they are? Though I haven't studied psychology, but then I started reading up a bit on that to just figure people out. And I find people very interesting, complicated, great. You know, anthropology as such, social anthropology is an area that interests me, and so it is.
Especially with your work, you've got this really amazing ability to look at contemporary life with humor, honesty, and self awareness. So, writing collective of human behavior.
Write satire, even though relationships are intrinsic to my storytelling, it's because I'm interested in the contradictions of human beings, what they portray and who they are, and what is said and what is left unsaid, the spaces in between. So now, when you start writing stories where you are dissecting a certain class, if you don't infuse it with humor, it'll sound like a lecture, right? It'll sound supercilious. So I think humor makes people trust you, and humor also is an initial hook that makes people feel disarmed, they feel relaxed, and then I guess their engagement with your work is greater. So I think one is that, and the other is I, of course, grew up reading a lot of humor. And whenever I have to choose between a really serious book and something that is satirical, and satire can be equally serious. But I mean serious, I mean when you between picking up a somber book or an intensely written book versus a book that's telling you the same story but in a light with a lighter touch, I pick that. I pick the latter. So I think I like to write the books. The kind of books I write are the kind of books I like to read, and that's why I use so much humor in my writing. Because if a girl's going through a divorce, everything's been taken away from her, and she's constantly whining and complaining and sobbing about it, then it's going to turn the reader off really quickly. So that's that.
I want to say, it's assumed that humor allows a person or in writing to somewhere convey what seriousness cannot. And you said that just right now that, a lot of heavy topics really spoken of, especially in our urban settings and environments. So do you think, does humor allow you to do that? Speak about social issues,
It allows me to do that without offending people, because when you use humor as a tool, and it's not personally aimed at somebody. Obviously, when I'm writing a story, I'm writing fiction. I think it allows people to see themselves in there without judgment. Because we judge ourselves so harshly. But if somebody says a story which is funny, but there's some truth in it, you may not use such a severe way to look at yourself any longer. In fact, that's why people read fiction, because they like to see themselves in there. Fiction isn't merely storytelling, and as much as storytelling is fun and we like to enjoy it, the books that speak most to us as readers are books where we've seen parts of ourselves in other human beings, our absurdities, our imperfections, and when I say something in a funny way, even in real life, I've noticed that it doesn't smack you in the face. It's like a gentle nudge.
You just mentioned, observing people helped you in a way to acclimatize yourself to new environments. Would you say humor and your style of writing is also a way of being for you, which in a way allows people around you to become comfortable, lower their guard,
Yeah.
and just be more of themselves? Is that something you felt?
I think so. I think so. I think that, like I said, it disarms people. I remember when I was a new girl at class, I was often, I was tall and outspoken, and that threatened people. And it was very easy for people to step back from befriending me. And and this wasn't something I was aware of then. This kind of knowing and self inquiry and figuring yourself out is a part of growing older. So as I grew older and I began to write, I began to understand that yes, I could intimidate people, and the same people who would be a little um, withdrawn from befriending me, who would hold back, would then feel disarmed if I make them laugh. And I think it might have been a coping mechanism. Um, and then it became a way of being. And sometimes within my own family, I'm told that you need to take this seriously, stop laughing. Okay. And I, in fact, go to, but when I, my way of coping with very, very bad news or a difficult phase in life is to also look at it with a sense of humor. So I think it's not just that it disarms other people. I think um, it makes accepting a lot of reality easier.
I think that's so honest and it's so well put, because it's not just, and that's also reflective of your writing, because though it's humor and satire, but it's so self-aware. So it seems like I'm going to jump a little towards how readers feel about your work, but I think as in general, how is it that you reflect on that as your own self now? Like your writing, how do you reflect on that as a person now?
I don't think I'll ever have that distance from my own writing where I can look at it and say, wow, this is amazing. Okay. Very few writers have that. Of course, there are times when I'm like, I like what I've written. Okay. Or I like how it sounds. But writers also tend to be, all creative people tend to be also very self critical. Okay. I mean, I wish there was some narcissism in us because it would just make the whole process easier. Um, so I think that my recent novel, it's received some very generous reviews across media, across every publication, and very serious publications also that only review serious literature. Now the thing is, when that happens, of course it's a kind of validation that as a writer you seek, because you don't have that distance from your own book and your own writing. And when you write something and it resonates with people, and then you have people DMing you or writing reviews on Amazon that we love what you wrote and I found it relatable, then you begin to say, okay, yes, I think what I wrote was not bad. But that's how it works. It doesn't start with feeling, oh my God, I've written an amazing book and it's bound to do well. You hope it does well. And you hope that the parts you have liked are also parts other people like. And when you write humor, it's a very fine line. You can easily tip over from someone who's trying to say something serious to someone um, who's being facetious, or who's being flaky, and who's being um, for want of a better word, for someone who's being superficial. It can easily tip over. So it's a very fine balance between speaking the truth and then balancing your humor and your observations as you do that.
So I think that now we can get talking about your work, The Wrong Way Home. And, the idea of home, it's quite deceptively complicated. And you'd understand this better because you've said you've spent so much time traveling all over. Can be a place, it can be a person, a memory. What did I want to ask you this question that, in adulthood, we often question the worlds we inherit and defining home. what does home mean to you? And through your writing, what does it like? What's the idea of home?
Like you said, it's deceptively complicated, the whole idea of home. And as someone who's moved so many homes, home to me would be a place where you feel you belong. Now, it doesn't have to be a place where you have history, but when you say you belong, it could be a set of people who accept you and like you for who you are. It can be your family. Uh, for some people, home is where their dogs are. I have dogs, and they're as important to me as my children. So I always say that whenever I travel, obviously a lot of people like to continue with longer holidays, and I'm no different. But then I suddenly say, no, I think I'm done here now. I need to go back home. And then somebody asks me, but your kids are with you. What do you mean home? To your routine? I say, not my routine, to my dogs. But on a more serious note, I think that just a place where you feel a harmony within yourself, where you feel at peace is home. It could be with your next to your mother, it could be next to your grandmother, it could be in a room full of books. So I think home means different things to different people. But in a social context, because I write satire, I think that a lot of your sense of belonging is also social. We borrow a sense of identity from our relationships, and they don't have to only be your marriage or your children or your parents. They are relationships that you form in the world outside of your immediate home. And in my novel, The Wrong Way Home, Nayantara is not only grieving the end of her marriage, she's grieving that she's lost that place in a social framework, because her friends have withdrawn from her. She's divorced from a man of influence. Without him, she isn't accounting to that much any longer, to a world which builds its relationships on your usefulness, not as much as you yourself. And so she's grieving all of that. Like, where do I belong now? In fact, the whole book is that, where do I belong now?
What kind of contradictions, apart from, of course, what you've tried weaving through your story about Nayantara in your book, you feel are interesting to write about, or something that you, as an observer, have seen that around you, but right now might not have written in your book?
Last novel as well, in Love in the Time of Affluenza, um, social satire, I mean. Look, when I say contradictions and absurdities, I think that there's a certain hypocrisy inbuilt uh, in society. And I think that there's a lot of image engineering that happens. People try and show happy marriages, people try and fake fulfillment, people signal wealth, people signal ideology, which may necessarily not be their ideology, but they want validation or acceptance. So I think all those gaps between reality and what is being projected is what I'm interested in. And I've said this before, that we are living at a time where we sit beside a version of ourselves, which is social media, and what we want to sound like. People are conducting relationships now by using AI. So if you're interested in art and you're talking about Matisse to somebody, and if that person has no idea who Matisse is, they can quickly say, tell me Matisse's favorite painting, and text you back and say, yeah, you remember Woman in the Pink Room, or the Woman in the Pink Dress, or, um, Matisse's home in Nice. And there's no way for you to tell if that person is faking it or not. But I just think that we are living in a world where there's just people are faking too many things. It's scary. And the further we move away from truth as people and as society, the further we are moving away from a deep, wholesome kind of happiness. Because you can't keep the facade going for too long, but everyone is putting on a facade. Fortunately, what's happened is that I think because of social media, TikTok and Instagram, so much of wealth signaling has happened that I was observing this recently, that people buy expensive things they've been buying since social media, again, to signal social acceptance and wealth. And now that those things have become so ubiquitous, like everybody can have a Chanel bag, and everybody can have, Loro Piana shoe, and everybody can have everything, and everybody can travel. So then what is that decisive factor that makes you feel a little superior and better than other people? Ultimately, it is that. So while people like beautiful things, people who advertise big logos are people who want acceptance, right? So so I see that these days, and I see that people are struggling to make their ends meet, but they want to signal wealth. And I think that's going to get killed very soon, because when everybody does it, then there's nothing special about it. So I think there's a very natural checks and balances kind of system, ecosystem, and that does help human beings evolve eventually into their more authentic selves. So that's the kind of stuff I'm interested in. And I'm giving you a very superficial example when I talk of branded things, but that's something which is so in your face right now. But even at a personal level, um, people are not being able to form authentic connections because uh, there's so much networking and social climbing again to be seen. So we've never before, our generation and Gen Z and Gen Alpha, before our time, never before has human being looked at other people so much. You only looked at your neighbors. At a wedding, you looked at your extended family and their friends. You never had to look at a stranger living in Rio de Janeiro, or somebody in Montreal, or somebody in some small Punjab town influencing from there. So never before have human beings had to look at their lives and compare their lives against so like billions of lives on the planet. And when that happens, then you try and be like other people, and then you no longer know who you are. And I think that is also one of the reasons that people feel so much anxiety. Because if you don't connect and relate with yourself, how are you going to have authentic relationships with other people? So,
So I think I want to ask you this next. The most fascinating part, you've spoken about people performing. So according to you, you would call out subtly right now, and
yeah.
you can call out for being performance.
Again, this is not judgment, this is observation. There's a big distinction between the two. I realize that now, women particularly, after they're done raising their children, my age group, they are looking for identities for themselves, right? And by that, I mean that you realize that to be relevant, you need to have something extending beyond I raised my kids. Because we're also living at a time where people have an opportunity to be who they are, uh, even online, right? Not just in terms of persona, in terms of running businesses, uh, in terms of getting degree courses online and going on to work in new fields. So age is no longer a binding factor in wanting to have a new career, be newly creative, or edify yourself and learn something new. So a lot of people, they who don't have firm identities beyond being a wife or a mother, start looking for that who am I question begins to haunt them. And what I find interesting is that somebody decides suddenly to cultivate interest in the arts and then start becoming art collectors, right? Then somebody will go ahead and become a watch collector or a bag collector. Firstly, I just think that if you can go and buy something with money, so then don't call it collector. See, I'm fond of watches, or I'm fond of bags or shoes, or jewelry, whatever, I think collection is when you really go and hunt in search of something. So if you were to say, I collect Mughal era jewels, then I could think you're a collector, because you'll have to really go far and wide and hunt down the pieces and go to flea markets. Or I collect Wedgwood made before 1940, that is a collector. But I think that if you have the money and you can take a flight to Zurich and buy something and come back, then you're just a spender. Okay. so so I think that so one is identity seeking that people do by this means. And then women discover different sides to themselves, and some women decide that they are going to use fashion, and they use fashion to arrive at an identity. And in a way, it's very empowering, and I'll tell you why. It's very easy to judge and say, oh yeah, they have money and they can spend it on themselves. But I think that to have a pursuit is so important. Now, if you can afford these pursuits, why not? Some people decide they're going to climb mountains. And I've known women who started climbing in their 40s and 50s. I met a very interesting lady when I was in Chennai 2 months ago, 3 months ago, where I was giving a talk on my book. She is 70 plus, and she summits one peak every year. Exercises, weights. Her name is Vidya. She wears weight on her body, walks up and down, cycles 7-8 kilometers in the heat of Chennai morning. She does all of that because she has a pursuit, a passion, you know. So I think that there are people who are lucky are people who know what they want to pursue, and those who don't know what they want to pursue, then they pursue what will make them more visible. And whatever works for you is good for you. But I notice that happening a lot these days.
You've observed, you've written about it. I want to now come to the feeling space of it. That does it make you at the end of the day, it's when it hits you. I wouldn't say social reality hits you, but even through your work, probably having even people like, have you felt that like there's a sense of cathartic feeling, possibly even with close readers or say friends who've read your work, and have you felt that it's taken the weight off their shoulders if they're really uppity about life and their image, like has that made a difference?
No, I think what people have told me is that Natasha sorry, Nayantara. Natasha was my last character. Nayantara is very flawed, and yet they find themselves rooting for her. So the most common reaction I've had from thoughtful readers is that reading this book has made them accept themselves better, which feels wonderful. And single women who've never been married and who are in their 40s or late 30s, and married women who've been married once but are not divorced, say that it's filled them with, they can identify with the character, and they can see parts of their lives there, and they find the struggles relatable, and they feel seen. Because I think that so far, at least, according to what I'm told, I don't think a book in this space has been written in this kind of style. So I think that is what has resonated most with people.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's the greatest review possibly a writer can get, is that somebody says that, I feel heard, I feel seen through your work. And I think that's something really honest in your work. It's through wit, humor. It's like it doesn't have to be so, like it doesn't have to just hit you in the face with emotional baggage, but
Yeah.
it does get the person, their
Yes, it
mind
does.
going.
That invisibility of Nayantara after her divorce, her irrelevance, along with her other personal struggles, where you don't only feel hurt when your relationship with a man is broken up or with a woman, you feel hurt when the same people who you thought were your friends don't have your back any longer, who feel they don't want to associate with you, right? Your heartbreak. I think she also has a girlfriends and those relationships, and she has a queer friend also, and so I think those relationships form a very important part of my storytelling as far as I'm concerned. And I think that our closest friends, even our oldest childhood friends, can be in some ways um, our frenemies. They can in some ways let us down, and yet we carry on with the burden of old friendships because we have shared past, shared history. And Nayantara has a friend like that who's always trying to make her feel that her own life and her own choices um, have. She feels superior about that, even though she has no career to speak of. But she feels that, at least I have kids, at least my husband loves me. And she makes it a point to remind Nayantara that none of her personal relationships with the opposite sex have really ever worked out because Nayantara has a career and Nayantara was married to a man of influence. At some level, there's envy. And envy can happen in the closest of relationships. So the relationship she has with this friend Anjali is a mixed bag because while Anjali cares for her, while Anjali shows up when, her father dies, while Anjali is there to send food for her when she becomes temporarily, I wouldn't say homeless, but displaced. At the same time, Anjali is privately gleeful that, see, my life worked out for me. So I wanted to even tap on that. And I think that friendship thing is also hit a nerve with some people, as in they've touched a nerve with some people. And they're like, this is something I found very relatable because even with your best friends, this can happen.
Okay. I want to know writing. So, what were your influences to give you, I would say, an edge and the niche that you have in your writing? So, books, films, what is it, art? What is it that shaped your world?
Everything. Films, maybe not so much, but books for sure. And other writers whose satire I've enjoyed reading. Um, even serious writers, you see what happens that it isn't just satire because there's also a serious story you're telling. And I think uh, everything you read, even bad books, influence you because they teach you how not to write. So I grew up reading Nancy Mitford, Sue Townsend. You know, closer home, I enjoyed Moni Mohsin. Um, she's a Pakistani British writer. A Diary of a Social Butterfly. That was years ago, but I was very young when I read it, and I laughed and I laughed. Uh, you know, um, I grew up reading David Sedaris. So I mean, one has read a lot. So I think I can't suddenly recall all the books that have influenced me, but uh, there have been writers who have just become part of my blueprint in my mind, and I'm constantly reading. I sometimes my kids ask me that, Mama, you went to the doctor. Why did you carry a book on you and you didn't even read it? But I always feel I might get 5 minutes to read it. Or even on a flight when I know I'm going to watch TV, I always pull a book out and keep it handy because um, I might get a chance to read it. And I loved reading Evil in War when I was growing up. Evil in War again is fantastic. So then books like Age of Innocence, Custom of the Country. So I think I very very rarely will you find writers who can tell you directly what has influenced their vocabulary to tell a story, and their emotional vocabulary. So i would I would think that it's possibly these books, but I read a lot of Tolstoy, which was more deeper. I think all Indians have grown up reading Chekhov and Tolstoy. So I think that War and Peace is one of the greatest books ever written. And every time I read it, firstly, I have a memory which is like a sieve, so I can't hold very much. And I actually have properly diagnosed ADHD, with ADD being the more prominent part of my brain. And so so I can't retain very much in terms of and yet I know that what has touched my heart. And I read something beautiful by Hanif Qureshi, because Hanif Qureshi, after he had his accident in Rome, uh, which left him his lower body paralyzed, has been writing a beautiful series of tweets, and then which became a book. And he wrote somewhere on good writing. Good writing is when something in your heart as a reader touches something in the heart of the something in the heart, your heart as a writer touches something in the heart of the reader. I'm paraphrasing it. And I think that reading serious literature teaches you how to do that. So, which is why I never read I don't read sci-fi. And I don't read medical fiction because I'm a hypochondriac and I start imagining I have all those illnesses. But I also don't read crime fiction, okay? But everything else I do read. And maybe it influences a little bit parts of you and your work and your world. Yeah.
I think now towards the end, just two quick questions I want to ask you. The first one is that has how has writing changed your way of understanding people? So whether it's family or it's just your social surrounding, how's it been?
I think when I write, it really does make me firstly understand myself. It helps me know what I'm thinking. And when you're writing even a fictional character, suddenly something clicks and you'll be like, oh, now I understand why they did what they did or who they are because. Uh, so I think what it has done is it has given me an X-ray filter, which maybe only comes alive when I'm writing. And whenever you're writing, you may see that you've pulled everything out of thin air, but fiction is so based on life. And it is it comes from life and your lived experiences and people you've seen and heard. And it could be somebody you met briefly on a flight. Some things and people and incidents just stay with you. And when you're doing that is when that X-ray vision comes on. Because on an everyday basis, when you meet people, you can't constantly be figuring them out. It's like a psychic. Psychics don't go in public transport reading everybody's aura and figuring them out, right? So it's the same way with writers. I think that it's a very subconscious process. And subconsciously, you make these mental notes about people. But I think that when you say figuring people out is as much a function of growing older, whether you're a writer or not. You just have more experience. And I love that. I love that. Uh, Very few things unsettle me today compared to before. I'm quite sensitive as a person. I have been rather, and 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 that understanding about things and learning that everybody is imperfect and so many people are faking it, uh, and that too is fine. So I think that acceptance and that knowledge is liberating. So we often say this on my podcast, which I do with my friend Kiran, called Not Your Auntie, that I would never want to be, I know you're in your late 20s, I'd never want to be in my 20s and 30s again.
Great. So just
Especially right now.
so, so I think this is the last one I want to ask you. Habit could be for someone your gen or the younger that you feel deserves for a satire to be written about, or possibly through that you give us a hint. Will that influence your next book?
I can't tell you what will influence my next book because it's not like a pre-decided thing. What is the thing? A new habit. Look, I mean, only today I did a whole Instagram carousel about. I noticed that when you travel, especially, you notice that um, so many people have done work to their face um, that they're all looking the same. So I think aliens won't come to our world because they'll think we only look like aliens. All aliens look the same, right? So I wrote about this that human beings we are fed, our minds are fed, our DNA is fed on such variation of faces around us, such a vast variation that now to see these faces with stretched skin, pouty lips, a perfect nose, and you look at it and you wonder, she's so pretty, but I'm not feeling anything, because I think imperfection is so important to hook your attention. And so I did this whole thing today on Instagram saying that it's like going inside a car showroom. When you go inside a luxury car showroom, all the Mercedes Benz around you and the Bentleys are looking the same, shiny. And so I think that's what's happening to human beings. And I find that the struggle to really become like clones of each other and to look perfect, it's striving for perfection, actually, which is a trend that I notice increasingly. And I was on a flight from Istanbul to London, and there were so many bandaged faces next to me because Istanbul is the cosmetic surgery capital of the world. And there were men who had had hair transplants, but there were women with puffed up faces wearing bandages around here because I think after facelift you need that. And there were tapes here and tapes here and tapes here. And I know that everybody's succumbing to the pressure. I mean, you have such a pressure. We are all living under this pressure to look good, to not look our age, and all of that. So I think that this is something that I think about a lot. And perhaps this is the new, it's not a habit, but the thing that everybody is doing right now, which, I mean, people are not looking like themselves. How does your phone unlock you? Not in direct response to one of the questions you've asked, but it sort of links in. is that today the pressures that women live under, women particularly more than men, the pressure to be really good parents, the pressure to have perfect bodies, the pressure to be relevant, to be somebody who doesn't quickly get forgotten, um, is so severe that whether and the pressure to be ageless, it's like some great achievement of yours if you don't look your age. So I think that pressure has to be acknowledged. So when women are going ahead and doing all these cosmetic procedures or lip enhancing procedures and everything else that they're doing, I think you have to face the fact that nobody today is looking their age. And when you look at social media and you see everybody with tight faces, you begin to look at your own self and say, oh my God, I'm the only one who looks this way. So I think that while it's easy to say age gracefully and look at Wahida Rahman and look at your mother and my mother's aged beautifully and so gracefully as well, I think it's easy to say, but then they did not live under this in this fishbowl system that everybody is living in. And even people who go around collecting art and shoes and bags and uh, making forming their identities based on that, I think also are doing because from a very young age they haven't been exposed to that one thing that they really should be good at and should pursue. That will fill up the void inside, that identity void. And I must tell you that I used to work, then I gave up working because I became a mom. And I was so consumed by motherhood that I completely lost interest in work. And my mother used to keep saying, don't give it up, don't give it up, keep writing, keep doing something. I was a PR consultant for some time. Please keep doing that. And I was like, no, 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 I want to be around my kids. And then suddenly a stage came where I went to a party and a very, very flamboyant, well known filmmaker met me there. I had worked with him previously in my working days. And he was like, so, how is the husband and the kids? And I was like, oh my God, is that who I am now? The husband and the kids. So I think that people begin to panic that who am I without my husband and my kids? And they begin to fake careers, which eventually they become passionate about. And there is one such person in my novel as well, the socialite, who is looking for meaning to her life. Um, so that's what I wanted to say. I think that the point is that while we can judge every woman getting a facelift and every woman who's a shoe collector, I think that if you go beyond judgment, you can understand that there is a reason for them being the way they are.